Drawing 2.6, I have taped it down. I've used the parallel bar or your T-square, whatever you're using for horizontal lines. That is the horizon, and I have taped the paper down so that the horizontal lines on the paper match the edge of the tool while its head's pressed up against the side of the table. I'm also going to go in before I start drawing and add a little bit of powder to keep things as smudge-free as possible. Our last geometric constructions, there are 3 of them, but they are all basically the same thing. They are all variations of the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to be adding a round corner to 2 lines that intersect. In this case, they intersect at 90 degrees. Over here, they intersect at an acute angle. And down the bottom, they intersect at an obtuse angle. Okay, with this idea of adding a rounded corner to lines, look around you, look at furniture, look at electronic devices. Square corners are not very attractive, square corners are not very practical. Square corners are actually weaker on an inside corner than a rounded corner. So this idea of rounding off corners on manufactured products is not that strange, really. So we're going to put a arc tangent to the edges that are there. Okay, we remember what tangent means when we were talking about sketching. We discussed tangent. So to set this up, it says draw a 1-inch radius arc. So to round off that corner with an elbow. Well, we know that to set our compass, we should do that on a piece of scrap paper. So I've got some scrap paper here. I'll draw a line on the scrap paper. I'll mark off 1 inch on that line so that when it's time to set my compass, I'm not jamming my compass point into my plastic square. I'm not jamming my compass point into my plastic scale and destroying it. So I've set that for 1 inch. That's a 1-inch radius now. And we'll start with the one in the corner where we have the right angle. So we want to add a fillet or a rounded corner between these 2 lines. So to do this, let's start off by putting the point on the very outside corner, and then very lightly make yourself an arc. And then keep that compass handy. Don't adjust it or change it or modify it. We need it to stay set to that same setting. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw a horizontal line from right here where the arc crossed my little dashed line there. Okay, and then I'm going to put my triangle on top of my square. And put my triangle on top of my T-square. Line it up where the arc crossed the horizontal line. And I'm going to draw a vertical line there. Alright, that's a lot of lines, huh? So what do I need all these lines for? Well, the idea is if you put the point of the compass now right there, right at the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal lines, it should be exactly 1 inch away from where we started. It should be 1 inch away from this line on the side and 1 inch away from this line at the top. And you know what? It looks like it is. Looks like it is. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of erasing and darkening, and to help me out, I'm going to just get rid of some of that other line work I just did. All I really care about is that point. Now that it's located, I'm going to draw a quarter circle. All right, and if you look at my fillet starts at the line and then becomes the curve and then stops again right perfectly at the line at this point here. So directly above the center point is where it stops, and directly to the left of the center point is where it starts. Now, I need you to go back in to finish the drawing up. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add the rest of the line up at the top here. Okay, so here's our dark line, and then at this point directly above the center it turns into an arc, and it comes around the corner, and then directly to the left of that center point we can darken in that straight line. Now it's a challenge to go from drawing by pencil to drawing by compass and get the lines equally dark, but I think you're up to the challenge. I think you can do this. And there's nothing wrong with going over it a couple of times until it is perfectly dark and matches the other two. Okay, but it can be done, and if you have a very sharp point on your compass lead there, dull it a little bit, rub it against the sandpaper pad, so instead of a sharp point, it's got a little flat spot. And if it's got a flat spot, well, it'll make a thicker line, right? So this is called a fillet. We put a rounded corner on two lines that were perpendicular to each other. And this is a pretty common operation we're going to have to do. Notice a couple of things. Notice that the arc starts here, directly above the center point. Notice the arc stops here, directly to the side of the center point. Now you probably know that you don't really draw arcs and circles without adding something else to the drawing. And that something else is called a center mark. So just like when we were sketching, or just like we do in CAD, when we draw circles and arcs, we need to add a center mark. So I'll use a thinner pencil for that, something with a smaller diameter, lead or something a little extra sharp. And a center mark is a long line, a short line at the center, and a long line after it. And then the same thing in the other direction. We have a short mark in the middle, making a small T. And then with the same gap up here, I'll go a little bit beyond the arc. And here is our center mark, showing us where the exact corner of that rounded fillet is. Alright, so that was our adding a 1-inch fillet, or a 1-inch tangent arc to the two existing lines, and then darkening in those lines, checking the darkness on our arc, and adding a center mark when we were all done. And that is complete. This next operation, adding an elbow or a rounded corner between two lines when they're not 90 degrees, is a little bit trickier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to show you how to do this as easily as possible. It asks us to add a 3/4 inch radius arc. So that means we need to adjust our compass to the proper size. That means let's get our scrap paper. Let's get our scale. And let's mark off exactly where 3/4 is so that we can set our compass correctly. Okay, and I've got a 3/4 inch setting now between my lead and my point. So probably the easiest way to do this is to pick a point on this line near its end, and somewhere on the end you're going to make a half circle. nice and light. And then you'll go to the other end and do the same thing. Doesn't matter exactly where, as long as you're on the line. Make a little half circle, nice and light. Okay, and then what we do next is we're going to draw a very light line, tangent to both circles. Okay, so now I want you to look at the line I just drew, and I want you to answer two questions for me. How far away is it from this line? And what's the relationship of this line to that line? So the distance is 3/4 of an inch, right? Because the radius of the circle was 3/4 of an inch. And the relationship of that line to this one is that they are parallel to each other. So if I want a 3/4 inch elbow on the end here, I need to create a line parallel to the original line at the radius of the elbow. Next step, I'm going to take my trusty compass, stick the end point at the end of the other line, make an arc, stick the end point somewhere at the end of the same line, make another arc. And I've got two half circles here now, 3/4 of an inch away from that line. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to draw a line tangent to these two lines now. And then if you see it, great, right? That's X. X marks the spot where the two lines meet. So I'm going to do mine nice and dark now. I'm going to make my construction nice and dark. I've laid it out very lightly. So if you lay yours out lightly, you don't really have to erase anything. But if you laid it out kind of dark, you might want to go in, take your eraser, and lighten up everything except that one spot right there where the two lines intersect. Because we're going to take our compass point and put it right there. And it should touch the line here, and it should touch the line down here. And if we put it in the right place, it will. Now, mine's off a little bit, and I can see I didn't stick it exactly perfectly at the intersection. It was a little bit above. That means my construction would be a little bit too high. And then on the bottom would be a little bit too low. So you might have to go in and really carefully ascertain that you are on that intersection. If you are, the lead touch is here, and the lead touch is up there. And it's perfect. It's not over, it's not under. It's perfect. And then you can go over it several times if you need to make it nice and dark. So there is the elbow. There is our 3/4 inch tangent arc or fillet that's going to connect this line to this line. And I'll go back in. I will darken the line that's dashed from there out. All right, so we have straight line, straight line, straight line at this point here. This is the point of tangency where the arc begins and it continues. Here's where that point of tangency ends, and then the straight line picks up again. I'm going to go in and darken that just a little bit more. Until I'm totally happy with it. All right, that looks good. Now our last geometric construction that we're doing together, draw a 1¼ inch radius arc that connects these two lines that are obtuse to each other. Darken those tangent lines when finished. So same thing we've been doing, just a different measurement, and it's going to look a little different because it's a angle greater than 90 this time. So first step is get our scrap paper and let's mark off 1¼ inches. And then we'll set our compass to our 1¼ inches. Just because the angle is larger than 90, it's really no different than the one we just did, where the angle was less than 90. You need to make some half circles. So start on the end and make a half circle. And then if you want to save a little work, put your next one right here at the vertex. You do it here, we can use it for both sides. And we'll do one more over here on this line. Okay, and then the layout is going to be the same thing we just did. We're going to draw some tangent lines between these two circles. And then tangent lines between these two circles. Okay, so ask yourself those same questions that we did before. How far away is this line from this line? How far away is this line from this line? Well, it's 1¼ because that was the radius we set. And what's the relationship of this line to this line? Well, they're parallel, just like this one is parallel to that one. There's x. Once you find x, take a look at your drawing. If you've laid it out lightly, there's no need to erase anything. If you've laid it out kind of dark, you might want to go in and clean things up a bit. Mine's laid out lightly. What I'm going to do is take my point, I'm going to put it on the x. I'm going to verify that my lead is touching the dash line here and the dash line here. And if it's not, look at where you stuck it. Now mine was a little bit off, just a little bit off. So I have to go back in and reposition it. Then I'll check, and I'll check, and now it's perfect. Okay, so what we're looking for here is we're looking for a smooth elbow that takes us from the angled line into an arc and then out into this horizontal line. And we just constructed that. So now I'll go back in, and then we want to darken in the remainder of the tangent line coming out that way. And coming out that way. And if your arc looks a little light, we'll go back in. Give it a little extra love, okay? A little bit of extra darkening if necessary, until it's smooth and dark and consistent. That line to the arc, out to that line again. If your arc went a little too far, you can take your erasing shield and go in there and clean it up. And that looks like we are finished with our geometric constructions that we're doing together. Down the bottom, don't forget to add 2 light guidelines at the top of the word drawn by and the bottom of the word drawn by, and then carefully letter your name in that section. And now we can talk about drawing 2.7. So drawing 2.7 I am not going to do with you. Drawing 2.7 is you applying the things that we just did together to solve two different problems here. So in our first problem we have a road and we have a side road that's joining into it. And what we want to do is we want to create a rounded arc to join this road to that road. We don't want to have a square little corner. It'd be kind of hard to get your lawnmower in there, right, if you're driving a tractor to cut the grass. Same thing out here. We don't want a sharp corner between the horizontal line here and the angled line there. We want a nice smooth transition with a fillet, with a tangent arc. So your job is to set this up using the dashed lines here as a guide and the sizes that they're asking for. When you're all done, you'll have a nice dark finished image. That's a solid line that turns into an arc that turns back into a solid line. And then on this side, we'll have a solid dark line that turns into a fillet that turns into another solid dark line. All right, and then we'll have our drawing of our two intersecting roads complete. So this is our first geometric construction, doing on your own, our little traffic intersection. Second one down here is a speedometer. And what we're trying to do is we have a space from here to here. We want to create this. We just want you to make it bigger, and we would like you to draw it by hand. So what you need to do is figure out where to make these divisions, right? Because we need to divide it into 9 equal spaces between 0 and 90. And then we need to add a couple of guidelines between 0 and 90. And then at each mark you put down, at each increment, you need to letter the appropriate speed. So carefully letter the number 10 at your first mark, 20 at your second mark, 30 at your third mark, etc., all the way down to the end. So when it's done, yours looks like this, except you've drawn it by hand. It should look almost as good. I mean, working with tools, a mechanical drawing looks almost as perfect as a CAD drawing. So take your time, make them look good, and then you'll be submitting these for a final grade on geometric construction.